distraught woman whose 3-week-old baby has died relies on a plumber to fix him. Parents concerned about their son's blossoming sexuality resort to using their own bodies to keep him on a straight path. A doctor diagnoses his patients with a symptomless coma, condemning them to a slow, painful death. A destitute man suffering from mental illness sells parts of his body to buy medication, is subjected to routine beatings, and exploited by London's elite art world, presented as a piece of performance art while lying in a painful heap on the ground. Bereavement, mental illness, incest, murder, and exploitation. What I've just described to you sounds like a series of horrific nightmares. But these are just a handful of ideas used for the sake of a comedy sketch show. 2000's Jam, based on creator Chris Morris's radio programme Blue Jam from 1997, is alternately described as a comedy and a horror sketch show, tackling societal taboos with as much focus on the absurd and childish. One thing it's definitely not is a horror comedy. In his essay on the unheimlich, or uncanny, Freud gives the term to the feeling elicited by experiences where primitive beliefs we have surmounted seem once more to be confirmed, where something unconsciously accepted, something familiar and congenial, is brought up to a conscious level, placed into an unfamiliar context. We see this principle in horror all the time. A child encounters something horrific that scars them, but which they need to repress, only for it to return, looking just the same as it did 27 years later. The doppelganger, the perfect double that shouldn't exist. A dummy or robot that almost looks human, but whose movements are just off, too mechanical to be organic. The inherent ambiguity resulting from this tonal contrast is similar to that of comedy's incongruity theory, which also involves the juxtaposition of certain ideas for comedic effect. With this in mind, let's examine one of the most notorious sketches from Jam, the one which earned the 26th spot on Channel 4's Top 100 Scary Moments list, The Boiler Baby. The sketch is based around a mundane and familiar scenario, a plumber coming to a house. Of course, the shock of the scene is the revelation that the woman is in fact grieving the premature death of her child in a state of disassociation.
I've come about the boiler.
Did I say boiler on the phone?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant baby.
Baby?
Yes, please. You see, the doctor won't do anything. He said he's dead or something, but I know he can be mended. I'm sure he can. It's just tubes, really, isn't it? And I'm sure you'd have a go.
This juxtaposition of the horrific, the death of a child, with the mundane, a plumber making a house call, has a disturbing, uncanny effect, but it also demonstrates comedic incongruity. It's absurd and possibly comic to hear the woman saying,
"You fixed the taps last Christmas, didn't you? You must be able to do something for him. You fixed the taps."
but we can attribute this warped logic to the dire state of mind she must be in, given the circumstances. The plumber's obvious horror seems to root the sketch in the real world, as if to say, we're alright, this isn't going to happen, he's got sense. But the next layer of shock comes in his agreement to perform the impossible task, to fix or desecrate a child despite this horror.
My husband would be so pleased. He says he's going to leave if I keep talking about the tubes, but
Well, I'm
I know
very
I'm
sorry.
right. And I'm sure
Mrs.
there is something you could do for
Please.
£1,000 an hour.
He's won over by the money, showing a lapse in morality, but also an understandable opportunism at taking up this generous
You
offer.
tried for 3 hours at £1,000 an hour.
Well, I can have a look.
Yes, just
This
pop
in
on.
and of itself is horrific, but his sudden change of heart is also tonally jarring, moving the sketch further into the world of the surreal. Then of course we're met by the outcome, the baby plumbing hybrid. That phrase is ridiculous in its contrast, like the dialogue.
It's nice and warm.
I've channeled the heating for him.
Come on.
The mise-en-scène is nightmarish, having morphed from the faintly warm, slightly off glow of the ground floor to the pitch-black dinginess lit only by a haunting baby lamp. And the music has gone from subdued R&B
I'll get my tools.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not promising.
No, you're not promising, but you'll do your best, and that's the main thing.
to an alien lullaby.
He's changed a bit.
The decision not to show the baby sync hybrid leaves it up to our imagination, employing Hitchcockian suggestion to increase our anxiety,
There's a tap on the side there, see, just there.
and also harking back to the radio form of blue jam, where absurdist images are much more frequent.
One thing I don't like, personally, he's been banned from the local newsagent. Now, to me, I'm not being funny, but that is not right. They say that he's like frightening the other customers, but how can you be afraid of like a little 4-year-old zombie buying a paper? There we are, darling. Mummy's got a little treat for you, Harvey. Nice little hand for you.
We've identified moments of ambiguity. They're either absurdly ridiculous or completely harrowing. It's easily one of the most horror-inflected pieces in Morris's body of work, evoking the body horror of Frankenstein and David Lynch's Eraserhead. This film in particular seems highly influential in creating the mood and focus of the jam duology. Morris even selects The Lady in the Radiator's song as the closing track to Blue Jam's first episode. Having said that, the moments of horror are also those with the most comedic potential. This reflects the idea posed by Freud that the uncanny can be employed to call forth a feeling of the comic. Compare that to the archetypal horror comedies, the Evil Dead series, Shaun of the Dead, American Werewolf in London, Scream, etc. These use the aesthetics of horror, most commonly the gory, to create a frenetic energy that complements their bizarre comedic purpose. You'll probably feel disgusted by a lot of it, but not frightened or disturbed on a deep level, and that's not really the point of them. They very clearly define what's supposed to be funny and what's supposed to be scary, but Morris chooses to blur these lines. In a way, it's the label of sketch comedy itself that makes the jam duology more disturbing. If you get through a sketch feeling more unsettled than amused, the thought that you were meant to find it funny in the first place means you reflect on the experience with either a sense of repulsion at the idea that the people who made this think it's funny, or further unease as you consider the true intentions of the programme. Morris also plays with these expectations in the technical presentation. In Blue Jam, he combines the style of a music show, with which he had several years of experience, with sketch comedy. The selection is generally of ambient dance tracks, some of which Morris would remix himself to include samples from classical and pop music, lulling the listener into a false sense of relaxation, while the content of the sketches would be disturbing and based in societal taboos. Though the focus on music was largely dropped in the transition to TV, the opening monologues were carried over. In these intros, a monotone Morris describes a bleak, desolate mental state, which the programmes are supposedly aimed at.
When you're sick, so sad you cry, and in crying, cry a whole leopard from your eye.
Sad mammal.
If you angry so mad, ye tongue burst and mouth juice run, gallbladder bitter. When you sick so sad, you place your face in the puddle of a lay-by, waiting for lorry to splash it.
Here we see more comic incongruity at work, with the dire and tragic juxtaposed with the surreal and nonsensical. Morris was inspired to create a programme of this more melancholy tone following a period of depression that came as a result of the sustained harassment he received from the British press after the broadcast of Brass Eye. You really get a sense of this from the detuned, disorienting ambience of the accompanying soundscape, which creates a feeling of numbness and disassociation, echoing the content of the monologues. Whilst translating this depressive mood, the TV version picks up on the horror potential of the monologues in its use of colour and imagery, with Morris's narrator's mouth contorting unnaturally and the audio becoming more aggressive than its ambient radio counterpart. All of this taken into account, it's important to remember that Morris is not predominantly concerned with horror. His style of humour is first and foremost provocative, delving into the surreal and satirical, often with a social and political focus, as in the day-to-day.
Sinn Féin is a legitimate political party.
Brass Eye.
Welcome to Petergeddon.
And Four Lions.
Not so fast!
The jams are a reflection of this, just taken to a more experimental avant-garde level. Their subject matter is just as inconsistent as the changing aspect ratios and formats of the video and audio, with sketches ranging from the horrific, to the bizarre, to the conventional. But maybe it's this inconsistency and willingness to push the boundaries of taste and format that makes Morris's work so funny, yet so disturbing.